what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
All right, and welcome to another episode of I Guess I'll Do It with Pat House. Today's guest I am very, very excited about. It's somebody I've known since I started, basically, and somebody I've known of since before I even started. We've worked together many times all over the country on the road, and even if we weren't working together, we've crossed paths in a bunch of cities and managed to hang out, and he's one of my favorites on and off stage. Today, my guest is Tom Rhodes. Tom, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Dude, anytime, man. Very, very happy to have you. So, yeah, man, we've known each other for a long time. I met you in Philly probably when I first started 15, 16 years ago. And then I hosted for you at Helium a bunch of times, and we've been buddies ever since.
True. And I like your gung-ho-ness that you've traveled all over the country to, we've done shows in Tacoma, San Francisco.
Yes.
And the way I always tell young comedians how to develop is what you've been doing.
Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. And I forgot to mention in your intro there that you are also one of my dad's favorite comics. I know you and him have talked on social media here and there because my dad will comment on stuff.
That's great. I want to be everybody's dad's favorite comedian.
Dude, I mean, what better credit is there? But yeah, no, we've crossed paths a lot of places. I've hosted for you and featured at a bunch of, you said Philly, Tacoma. We did, God, Jesus Christ, the Stress Factory early on in my career. And we hung out. You were and I were in Vegas at the exact same time last February, right before the pandemic.
Wow. That's right.
I was at Jimmy Kimmel's Comedy Club, and you were at the Trop, I believe.
Yes.
That was a really fun night because me, you, Dan Cummins, and Brian Regan all hung out, and that was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's right. And Carl LeBeau was there.
Yeah, Carl. Yep. Yeah. So Brian and Tracy Skeen, who were two comics from New Jersey and Philly that now live in Vegas. But I remember us hanging out afterwards, and that was crazy because I grew up loving you and Brian Regan. Even before I was a comic, I met Dan Cummins along the way, and he's been monumental in my career. But here we are in Brian's limo just cruising around Vegas, and I was like, what the fuck is happening?
Brian's one of my oldest friends in life. When I started doing comedy in Florida, I started when I was 17 in high school. And then when I was 18, I started doing crappy one-nighters around Florida and different comedy clubs. And I've worked with Brian and known him since I was 18 years old.
That is awesome.
So when I'm in Vegas, he lives in Vegas, and when I'm in town, he usually comes out and we hang out. And one of his favorite things is to get a group of comedians and drive around Las Vegas all night in a limousine.
Dude, it was so fun. It was so fun. Because you guys are my favorite comics, and it was just because I flew in from Philly that day, and I don't know what was going to happen that night, and then I just flew in, checked into my hotel, did my everyday routine when I'm on the road, and then next thing you know, we're all hanging out in a limo, and I was like, wow, today took an awesome turn.
That's the beauty of comedy, isn't it?
Dude, absolutely. I had Chad Daniels on a few weeks ago, and he said something I think about ever since that episode. He said, a lot of cool things in comedy happen. A lot of cool things happen if you just let them be cool. We get so wrapped up in it being work that we forget that the coolest shit happens, but we're overthinking it. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And God, there's so many beautiful people in the comedy world. And that's the thing. Since the pandemic hit, I realized that, not only do I miss performing, but my whole social world revolves around stand-up comedy. All my best friends are comedians. All my best life experiences happen hanging out with other comedians, going to different cities around the world and seeing different friends. And, you never know where the evening is going to take you with some of these beautiful lunatics.
No, that's 100% true. And that's the exact reason why I started this podcast. I mean, in the absence of live shows, I'm able to talk to my favorite comics and friends through this on a more personal level, and I get to selfishly guide the conversation where I want it to go. So,
Shouldn't this podcast be called "I Would Enthusiastically Love to Do It"?
with Pat House, you know what? We can make an addendum. So I love to start the podcast by talking about how, we got ourselves into this. And I love your story because, like you just said a minute ago, you started comedy very young at 17. I was 19. So I'm glad. It's so cool that you and I can say teen at the end of our beginning there. So take me back to the beginning. Like, even before you were doing stand-up, what was your interest in comedy when you were a kid? Because, Jesus Christ, you started when you were a kid. So what was before that?
My family is originally from Washington, D.C., and my father he loved stand-up comedy. And my dad loved Richard Pryor. He was a huge Richard Pryor fan. My dad had tons of Richard Pryor vinyl records and Bob Newhart. He listened to a lot of Bob Newhart. And I grew up listening to these records. And I remember as a little kid driving around with my dad. There was no seatbelts back then. And I would stand next to my dad as he drove, and I had my arm around over his shoulders. And I just remember my dad laughing and feeling his shoulders quake as he laughed as we're driving around listening to Richard Pryor. And I didn't understand a lot of the adult content that he talked about. But when Richard Pryor would animate animals and things like that, I just pissed myself laughing. And it was always this really special thing with my dad. So my uncle did open mic night comedy in Washington, D.C. for 1 year. And my father took me to see him. I was 11 years old. The club was called El Brookmans. And the show was in progress when we got there. And the stage was next to the entrance. And we walked in. I'm 11 years old, and I have a Washington Redskins jacket on. And the comedian on stage pulled me on stage, and he interviewed me like I was the coach of the Redskins.
Oh.
And I was 11, and I just gave little kid bashful, dopey one-word answers like yes, no. But I'll never forget standing on that stage and seeing all those happy people with their heads thrown back in laughter and all the teeth in their mouth. And that moment changed my life. From that moment onward, I never wanted to do anything else with my life. And Washington, D.C., like Philly, it's very diverse city. And I know I've romanticized that moment in my mind, but in my mind, there was every flavor of humanity, Black people, Asians, Latino people. Just when you were, it got in my mind as a comedian, when you're on stage, you're talking to the world. So from that moment onward, I became a student of stand-up comedy.
At 12 or 11, did you say?
At 11, yeah.
That's awesome.
I would watch, I'd look at the TV guide and see when Johnny Carson had comedians on, or Merv Griffin and Mike Douglas, those daytime shows. This is 1978, so I think SNL started in 77. So I started watching SNL, and then HBO 1 hour comedy specials was something that I would do with my dad, and we would, we'd watch them. Every time there was a new special on, we'd watch it, and we'd talk about afterwards. We talked about what we liked, what we didn't like, what we thought of the comedian, and my family moved to Oviedo, Florida when I was 12. So I started doing everything at the high school. When I was a junior, I started hosting the pep rallies and the talent shows. And that was the same year I started doing stand-up. So I kind of got a little bit of practice in at my high school doing stand-up. And then when I finally did my first open mic night at 17, my dad drove me. And the first time I was too embarrassed to have my dad come in with me, so he actually waited in the car.
That was going to be my next question.
and then on the drive home, I told him what worked and what didn't work. And then my second open mic night, he came in with me. And my father was killed by a drunk driver in 2009. But all throughout my career, my dad always came to shows. He would always come New Year's Eve. You met him in Philadelphia one year.
I did. We worked together the week he passed. I remember that.
Oh, yeah. I was pretty wiped out when that happened. And then that's why your father liking me, I'm sincere when I say that means a lot to me, because my dad was my biggest fan. And, I did a special called Viva Vietnam on Comedy Central, which my dad was a Vietnam veteran, and he really loved that. And then a really nice, sweet story is my dad lived in L.A. for years. And when I had my sitcom on NBC, my father actually sat in the front row for every taping.
Oh, that's awesome. That is really cool.
So comedy was like kind of something this special thing that I shared with my dad. And that's how I fell in love with it.
I think that's really cool that you not only one had that relationship, but that both of you loved and understood stand-up enough to like analyze what you liked and didn't like. Like, it's a whole other thing to sit there and enjoy it, but to actually break it down with like bullet points is a whole nother separate beast of the crazy, not the crazy. Well, no, but the crazy we appreciate.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a serious topic, and it was something that we both really, really loved. So, I think it and here's another nice story. And I wasn't living in LA at the time, but Pryor was my father's dude, and Pryor's like a god to me,
Oh, well, yeah, of course.
I remember there was one time, I think it was Richard Pryor's, it was his birthday, and he was going to do a set at the Comedy Store in LA, and I got my dad tickets. Me and my dad went and saw him, and Richard Pryor was eaten up by MS. He was in a wheelchair. He could barely hold the microphone up. Like, two big, strong doormen lifted his wheelchair onto the stage, and he did 20 minutes. And 15 minutes of those was about 15 minutes of the 20 was about pussy licking, and I forget what the other 5 was about. But when he finished, my dad and I sat in the back row of the original room, because I play there a lot now, and that's where they let the comedians sit now when you're waiting to go on. So they took Pryor off stage, and they put his wheelchair in the back right in front of my father and I. So my father and I got to shake his hand, and here's our hero, and he's right in front of us. And that was one of the biggest thrills ever.
That is, did you guys actually have words with him, or was it a brief?
No, we love you, Richard, and God, that was great. And he wasn't the virile, fire-breathing dragon he was in his youth, because he had MS. But just to be in the same room with the man and share molecules and breathe the same oxygen, and the fact that we got to shake the guy's hand was worth every cent. And now. I'm a regular at the Comedy Store, and I think about that sometimes when I'm sitting in that back row waiting to go on stage. I'll remember that moment of sitting there with my dad, and Richard Pryor's 2 feet in front of us.
It's so weird when you get to encounter your heroes like that. That shit never goes away. Now, was the 15 minutes on pussy licking funny?
Yeah,
good.
Yeah.
Okay. That's exactly what I was kind of getting at. He wasn't firing on all cylinders like the way we're used to knowing him.
No,
right?
But you could tell that it meant a lot for him to be on stage. It was his birthday, and I don't think he performed very much after that. It was.
Oh, so you saw one of the very, very last ones.
I might not, but I don't think it was his last one, but I would say probably within his last 20.
Wow.
Show sets that he did.
So where was your very first open mic then? At 17. So you're doing the pep rallies and you're doing shit for your school, and that kind of gives you a little bit of a foundation. So where was the very first time you went on stage by yourself, specifically to do stand up?
There was a comedy club in Orlando called the Funny Farm, and that was the first place that I got to go on. And I was 17 years old. You have to be 21 to be in the clubs. I had a fake ID. I got in, and my dad's waiting in the car. I got a fake ID, and that club, like I got to, they made me a regular, and then I gave up all my weekends, like going to dances or football games, and I would go to the comedy club. And a year after I started, they changed the name to the Copa Banana,
Uh,
which to this day is still probably one of the worst names for a comedy club ever.
oh, that's why I don't know if you heard me. I made a sound like
Yes.
that was actually a visceral reaction to that. That's a terrible name.
There was a club in East Ealing, London, years ago called Ha Bloody Ha. I think that's probably number 2 on worst name for comedy.
No, that would definitely be up there. So how did that first set go? The first time you're 17 years old, Tom Rhodes on stage doing your first open mic, what was the reaction?
I mean, it was, it was a terrifying roller coaster ride. And, when you're doing your first open mic night, you're trying to remember the jokes that you've prepared in the order that you've prepared them. And I mean, I got some decent laughs, and I had made some props in art class. There was one prop that I did, and it was and I didn't. I think maybe my only like the beginning open mic night level did I ever use any props. But I remember I had a piece of plexiglass, and I had taped painted a red X on it, and I did my impression of Richard Dawson at a singles bar trying to pick up ladies. Which, if you remember, he used to host the Family
Feud, yeah.
And when you got the answer wrong, it would go, and the red X would be on the screen, So it's just stupid stuff. I remember I with a Sharpie marker, I wrote, I drew on my stomach, I made a UPC code. And I said, a total lie, I said, my father works in a grocery store, which he didn't. I said, I come from a big family, and my dad works in a grocery store, and to keep track of all of us, he put these on us. And I lifted my shirt, and I had the stupid UPC code.
I mean,
like they're just really cornball open mic night level bullshit, But
I see what you mean. Like, yeah, I mean, you say it's cornball now, but you were 17. I mean, I started doing stand up at 19, but I started writing ideas down at like 15 or 16. And I look back at that stuff and I think it's cheesy as shit now. But at the time, it worked. And some of this stuff I looked at and I'm like, you know what? Not bad for writing at 17. Like,
yeah, no, I moved to LA. I had everything in storage for 10 years before I moved to LA 5 years ago. And for many years, I've been stuffing stuff in my mom's attic. So when I moved to LA, I cleaned out all the stuff I had in my mom's attic. And I found a comedy notebook from when I was 17. And there were some, there was a few clever jokes in there. One in the, and this is, so I mean, the props I just did like first open mic night, second open mic night,
yeah.
That wasn't, I very soon into the journey, comedians told me, get rid of the fucking props,
Yeah, you dropped it quickly. I get it.
Yeah. But I remember there was a joke in my 17-year-old book. If you remember, what was this, 1984? If you remember, Africa starving, We Are the World and all that was the big topic.
Yeah.
And then Paisley was very popular in men's fashion. So this joke that I did when I was 17 that I saw in the notebook was, I donated a bunch of clothes to charity. And the man in the charity shop said that these clothes were going to be sent to Africa. Oh, I could see some guy in Africa wearing my clothes going, gee, I hope this Paisley vest doesn't clash with my genitals.
That's a great joke. That is a great
Not
joke.
bad. Not bad for 17.
No, I was like, I don't know what, I can't remember how it came about now, but I was young. I was like 13 or 14, where people would tease me about the last name House. And I said, my kids are going to have it worse than me because I'm going to name them Whore and Crack.
Ha ha ha.
And I mean, is that joke great? No, but is it good for a 14-year-old? Absolutely.
No, that's great because you know what I dislike when you see young comedians, and the first joke is, "I know what you're thinking. I look like bumpity bump," and you know I always think that lacks any cleverness. But like to make a joke about yourself and your name, I think is clever.
It's more
And
personal.
It's more personal, and my girlfriend, I told her that I had to, I was going to do this podcast with you. And I told her, you know, I really like this guy. He's a comedian from Philadelphia, known him a long time. And all morning she's been calling you Pathaus.
I'll take it. It makes me sound like Greek or something, but I mean,
Pathaus. I like that.
it almost sounds like,
Is it time for you to talk to Pathaus?
I know it's that Pathaus sounds like almost like a philosopher. So that's why I kind of like it. It's like Socrates and Pathaus. It's like who said what? I more than happy rolling with that.
I like it.
So how long were you doing it? You were still a teenager when you started to get, weekend work about a year or two in?
No, I got, I mean, pretty much immediately. And the really great thing about when I started and the club where I started was there was no touring headliner comedians. It was all local comedians. And there were a couple guys that were like the stars of the scene. There was this guy, Harry Milky, and he was on these local waterbed. It was the Water Bedroom Ranch. These commercials for this place that sold waterbeds. And he was dressed like a cowboy. And his commercial was, if you're in the market for a waterbed, don't get soaked. And then somebody would toss a bucket of water in his face. This guy was a local superstar, because of these commercials. But what I was going to say was, because everybody was a beginner pretty much, other than, the celebrity, local stars, people didn't know what they were doing exactly. So there was this incredible freedom where what they did was, it wasn't just comedian in the lineup. What it was, it would be comedian, skit, comedian, skit, comedian, skit. So they actually had rehearsals on Monday night where you would bring in, everybody was encouraged to write skits and bring them in. And I think like everybody should start like this. It was so fun. And so like, not only would you get to perform, your open mic night set, but you'd also get to act in a skit or two. And I remember one of the skits that I wrote that I did, Boy George was really big. And I wrote this skit called Boy Tom. And I took a twister board and I, cut a hole in the middle to put my head through and stapled the sides to make it a dress. And I came out as Boy Tom. I'm a comedian. I tell a joke. So, it was pretty silly. I'm, looking back now is like cringeworthy, but it was fun. It was fun. It was fun to just be constantly thinking comedy, writing comedy, and just trying to not only turn things into jokes, but like, oh wow, how can I write a skit that will impress all of my local comedian friends?
Yeah, it's always about impression in the beginning too, because you want to come out the gate strong.
Still is, baby.
To your peers. Yeah, no, I stand corrected. You're right. You know what's funny about what you just said that made me cringe on my behalf? Like, I know that you did that as a joke in a skit, but like, you could not pay me to sing on stage for any reason. Like, I just had a moment where I like shuddered because I can go on stage and talk about my dick or sex or jerking off or anything in front of thousands of people. doesn't bother me in the least. You ask me to sing in front of people, I diarrhea immediately. Cannot do it.
Wow.
But
Well,
that's my own fucking shit. But
I'm going to ask you to sing next time I see you.
all right. Okay. Have you done any Zoom shows or any shows during the pandemic?
I have done 0 Zoom shows. I've only done a handful of podcasts like this. To sit in front of a computer and tell jokes is not my idea of doing comedy. But in November, I got to do a few shows. There's a club an hour north of San Diego. It's the Grand Comedy Club in Escondido. Friend of
Okay.
mine was Paul Ogata was doing shows there, and he invited me down to do to do a set. And next to the club, he's got this massive outdoor patio, and the guy had heat lamps. All the tables were 6 feet apart. Everybody's wearing masks during the show, and then they changed and disinfected the microphone after every comedian got a new mic.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And
Did it
it felt like doing open mic nights again. I had some new stuff I wanted to try, but I was, I had the confidence. It's like being a really confident open micer now, you know?
Yeah,
and
it's a
then,
strange time. It's a strange time to be doing stand up all around because you want to do new stuff, which is natural to us, but then you're like, shit, I need to do the old stuff so I can try to get back on track, and pick up where I left off essentially.
yeah. So, I mean, it's funny how quick I couldn't remember all normally I do like 45 to an hour when I'm headlining. And I think I did a 10-minute set. I had about 4 minutes of new material. And then it was clunky trying to remember the older stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then there's a place in Venice Beach. So I did 2 at that Escondido Club, and then 2 in Venice Beach. There's a compound. It was owned by Harrison Ford, and his children lived there. This is what I was told, and they were all on drugs, and the place fell into disrepair. A year ago, an architect bought the place. And in all the bungalows on the property, he's letting freelance architects use it as office space. So the architect who bought the place is friends with Ahmed, who started doing these not so secret shows there. And there's a lap pool, a big long lap pool through the center of the property. And there's only like 30 people are allowed in as the audience. And they're all, 6 feet apart. Everyone's wearing masks during the show. And the comedian is on one side of the lap pool. And same as the other place, they changed the mic every time. I worked with Neil Brennan in Escondido the second time I went there, and then the second set I did in Venice Beach, I opened for Bill Burr.
Nice. I saw those photos on Instagram. That looked so awesome.
It was so fun, man. And then I was really I find it's a really great epoch that we're living through as a comedian, to have this, like, everybody essentially is going to be starting back over. I was talking to Bill backstage, and he's having the same thoughts and feeling. Well, he did 45 or an hour, but it's the trying to get your sea legs back. Whew. And trying to get your pistons firing, and your memory and the way you want to say these things and express these thoughts. So I was really happy I did 4 sets in November, and it seemed like, this is going to be going, I'm slowly going to get to be going back on stage. And then the virus surged again and everything got shut down again. So now we're back to square one.
Yeah, no, we are. I was just saying the other day, this is the first time I've been doing stand-up 16 years. And this is the first time in 16 years that I don't have a single date on the calendar. And it's weird. Like, even when I was new and doing open mics and bar shows, at least I was booked on shit. And now
Yeah.
it's like nothing. And it's so bizarre.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know you're the same. That it's you're always I always book myself 6 months in advance. I'm always on top of it. I know, like, the places that love me and have me every year. Atlanta, Minneapolis, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle. Like, so I know I can fill my calendar with those things. I it's funny to not, like, all my work was canceled from March onwards after the virus hit. And then now I just booked for the end of March, the Laugh Factory in Las Vegas, where you were talking about earlier at the Tropicana.
Nice.
And then in April, I booked Brad Garrett's at the MGM in Vegas. So the last show I did in 2020, where I was the headliner, because I did those 4 sets in November,
Yeah.
was March 8th. And it is amazing to me that I will have gone 1 full year without paid stand-up work.
It's a mind fuck, right, man? It's so bizarre.
Who could have possibly? I mean, so much shit has happened. I was talking to my girlfriend last night. She was living in Portland, and I went up there. I spent the first 4 months of the pandemic looking after my 80-year-old mother.
Mm-hmm.
She was visiting me when the pandemic hit, and then the riots. I live in the Fairfax district of Los Angeles. The riots all happened in my block. My mom and I we actually went to the George Floyd protests in the park across the street from my building that turned into the LA riots. So the LA riots happened, the virus, the LA riots. Then my mom went back in July. In August, I went up to see my girlfriend. And then September, the fires in Oregon drove us back to LA. And then in September, there was an earthquake in LA. I'm sorry for the hesitation.
No. It's just one thing after another. You're trying to put them all in line.
Yeah, well, I don't want to. We witnessed a suicide in November.
I heard that because I listened to your last podcast last night.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
is that the apartment I was at with you? Remember,
yeah.
Okay, yeah, all right. Because you were describing coming out of your building, and I was like, oh, that's where he came to meet me at his building. So I knew where you were talking about.
Yeah, and so there's a parking garage a block away, and this woman, as we were walking by, jumped off of it, and she landed 3 feet to my right, and we're fucking traumatized. And then there was the next night that I did a set opening for Bill Burr in Venice Beach.
Jesus Christ, man, that's still fucking on your mind so heavy too.
Well, the week after, it just played in my mind, like the way that people used to talk about Vietnam veterans having flashbacks.
Yes,
I'm that guy now. So don't drop anything near me. For the week after, it played like 200 or 300 times in my mind. I couldn't get this image out of my head, and now it's less. I've been trying to schedule an appointment with a therapist, but
I was going to ask you, did you get one yet? Because on the podcast you mentioned that you were looking. So did you get one yet?
I'm supposed to schedule one tomorrow. It's apparently everyone in the United States is having mental problems now, and it's been hard to get an appointment. But so I think this week I'm finally going to get to talk to somebody.
Good. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like seeing that. I mean, we've all experienced all sorts of fucked up shit in our lives, but that I can only imagine how witnessing something like that is just a whole different beast in itself.
Well, I think I was having a pretty good pandemic until that happened.
Yeah, which, well, you know what? That's a joke right there. I was having a pretty good pandemic until. That's honestly, you know what? I've known you for a long time. That sounds like a Tom Rhodes joke right there. I'll tell you that.
Well, I was telling my girlfriend that, and it's like, it's making jokes now, and that's, part of the healing
That's how we process. I
that's
mean,
how we process things. But for a month, there was, only now am I starting to make some jokes about it.
too soon is a real thing. Like,
well,
I know.
I mean, for the couple of weeks after it happened, like I talked about on the podcast, like, I would just I would break down crying. And then my girlfriend would hold me. She would break down crying. I mean, this was like combat level death that we saw. But, people who go to combat, first responders, police, and firemen, they're trained for that kind of thing. Normal people like us, just regular citizens, we're not trained to see that kind of death happen. Someone fall out of the sky right next to you is, so the joke I've made recently to my girlfriend was, and I think it's because it's been so hard to schedule a therapist. I said, considering, how fucked everybody is mentally right now, I guess we should consider ourselves lucky that it was only one person. Like it's not like 20 or 30 people fucking falling out of the sky every day.
Oh yeah, you're right. We're not supposed to see that kind of stuff in everyday life. About, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, I was at a restaurant and a guy died in the restaurant, and he was dead. Like, he was dead. And I'm sitting there having lunch.
It was just like it was an illness that hit him.
I think it was a sudden heart attack.
Oh, okay.
And the paramedics came and they did, like, the chest compressions and the shock shit, and, like, to no avail. And then I'm sitting there having lunch and they bring his body past our table. Fucking
Wow.
weird. But that's not to the level of what you witnessed. Like, this was
yeah, it was funny.
A lot less traumatic, like physically traumatic, I guess. It was still a dead person that they still wheeled past our table. And also, I did have a joke about this, and it's a true story. A table full of girls still sang "Happy Birthday" like 15 seconds after they took his body out of the restaurant. I swear to God, that's 100% true.
There was a show or a movie I saw not too long ago where and I think it was in they were in Scandinavia or something, and some guy dies in the restaurant, and he had just been poured a fresh beer, and they said, "Does anybody want his beer?" And some guy took it. I forget what show it was, but like, and everybody's looking at him like, "Oh, you're drinking this dead guy's beer."
That's really funny.
Well, what's interesting is, the friends of mine that I've talked to in the past month, I did so many people have experienced like trauma that I told this one friend of mine about this the other day, and I've known this guy for 20 years, and I didn't know he told me when he was 13, he witnessed a murder suicide in church. And
Jesus.
some estranged boyfriend came in and blew his ex's brains out, and then blew his brains out. And that was in church, one pew in front of him. And I've known this guy for 20 years. I didn't know that. And
Wow.
then this other friend of mine in San Francisco, I was telling her about it, and she told me she saw someone jump off the Bay Bridge once. And apparently there's a lot of people who have experienced a lot of
Crazy shit.
Yeah.
Wow. Jesus.
So, my girlfriend just came back into the how do you say his name?
Pardon?
How do you say his name?
Oh, Patel. I didn't know.
Pathaus. Okay, that was it. Thanks, Dave.
That's
Cool.
like the most intelligent way to say my name. That, like I said earlier, that sounds like some sort of Greek or Roman philosopher, and I'm just going to roll with that.
I think I think it's adorable nickname you have now.
Well, because of you, Todd Glass always calls me Pat Motherfucking House. So this is another one to just add to the pile.
I like it.
Well, I hope you get to see somebody soon, man, because that's something else.
Yeah, that was pretty heavy shit. I mean, and my girlfriend and I have, we've studied it like the Zapruder film and the Kennedy assassination and talked about it from every angle. And, we have just this profound sympathy for this woman who was in that much pain that she had to do that. And, it's funny, since that happened, it's kind of made me, I think I've always been like a caring and compassionate person, but, like now when I go to the grocery store, I'll say to the cashier, how are you doing? Like I'm like trying to like be more aware of, maybe somebody who's a little stressed out and having trouble in their
Yeah, well,
life.
that's compassion. You want to make sure everybody around you is good.
Yeah,
You're
and
just
then even
checking in on everybody.
and then even friends of mine and like comedians. I know there's loads of people having a hard time. I'm trying to talk to as many friends as I can, send text messages to people, and just reach out to the people you care about, because you never know, who's fucking letting the demons take over their thoughts.
Going through some shit. Like
Mhm.
going through some heavy shit.
Hey
Well,
Pat,
anyway.
yesterday was my 8-year anniversary that I stopped drinking alcohol.
Okay. I am glad you mentioned that. I have that written down here because my Facebook memories today brought that up. There's several photos of you and I from that night, and
Yeah.
I know that happened in Philly, and there's a couple things I have written here about shit I would want to say to you about Philly.
I think you were hosting, weren't you? That
No, I was featuring. Luke
Okay.
Cunningham was the host. I was the feature. You were headlining, and we had 3 shows on New Year's Eve. And this is like the crazy comic professional business side of me. The shows were timed so poorly. We had 3 shows in one night. And I remember on the late show, the host did like 5, I did like 7, and you did like 30 because we had to get to the champagne toast at midnight, and everything was so fucked up that night. And it bothered me that all of our times were so askewed every show.
Yeah, and you think about
That's crazy. That's crazy on my end, but that's one of the big things I remember from that night, because that midnight show that probably paid the most money saw like maybe 45 minutes of stand-up combined.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. Like the people that go out on New Year's Eve, especially the show that's going to strike midnight, is those people. They're normally paying like 3 times the normal price, and those people didn't get what they paid for.
I'm not saying I'm a hero here by any means, or that I know what's right, but I remember saying to the manager at the time, she was a kind of a temporary manager there. She wasn't there for that long. We were doing our second show, and then she said like, all right, 15, 30, 45. And I was like, hey, I get to Tom should do 45, but how about the host does like 7 and I do 15? She's like, no, we'll stick to our times. And the whole time I'm thinking, this is going to fuck up the late show so bad. And I was 100% right. Like, I'm not saying that to be cocky, but I remember just trying to talk to her and she wasn't having it. So whatever. It ended up being a very, very short show, but she's the manager. And that was her call.
Yeah. Well, I really loved that club, Helium, and I played there from when it opened. And I think I did 3 New Year's Eves there. That was the last one. And I know my dad came to 2 New Year's Eves when he was still alive. But that New Year's Eve was on a Wednesday.
That was a long week. We had like 8 or 9 shows that whole week.
Yeah, and so the way it worked was did the New Year's Eve on the Wednesday, and we all had Thursday, January 1st off.
Correct.
And then we did the weekend shows. That's the way the contract was for that particular New Year's Eve week. So on January 1st, I I don't think I ate too well. Like I think I had a couple of falafels. I didn't really have like
A Philly cheesesteak.
I didn't have any meat protein like a Philly cheesesteak. And that night I drank 10 Sierra Nevadas, hanging out in a bar by myself. And
I know the bar. Do you remember the name?
well, I started at this one bar, and then I moved. They closed like at midnight or some shit, and I had to go because it was. I remember the Fiesta Bowl was on, and I don't give two shits about college sports, but
Makes two of us.
my University of Central Florida was playing, and my brother was there at that game. So it's on in the place, whatever. I'm hanging out. I got the night off. And then there was like a quarter left, and then the bar closed. So I had to go somewhere like, 3 or 4 doors down, half a block down to some other bar. And I got another pint, and I blacked out and fell off my bar stool and busted my head open. And then I had to, I did a story about it on stage for a while. Some guy lifts me up and he yells out, "We got to call an ambulance." And I said, "Fuck that. I don't have health insurance. Don't you dare."
Yep.
He goes, "You got to get to a hospital." I said, "How far is the nearest hospital?" He said, 2 blocks. I said, 2 blocks, and you were going to call an ambulance? So I got a wad of napkins off the bar, and I walked to Thomas Jefferson Hospital, downtown Philadelphia. And I got 6 stitches in my head, which cost, I forget, what did they charge me? I gave them my real name and my real address and everything. I think 6 stitches cost me like, I want to say it was $7,000, $8,000.
Jesus Christmas.
Yeah, fucking ridiculous for 6 stitches.
Where'd you go? You probably went to Jefferson.
I went to Jefferson. That's where I went.
Okay. Was this at Finn McCool's?
I think that was it.
Okay, that's where I met Chip Chantry. They used to have open mics there every Monday.
Because there was a little working man's bar I was at on Sansom, just like a block from there. That's where I started, and then I moved down to that other place.
Could have been Fergie's Pub.
Okay, so anyway, one of the my life was changed forever on Sansom Street. So the next day I woke up and I saw, so this was 8 years ago yesterday, January 2nd. I woke up and I saw so much ugliness in the mirror. I had these Frankenstein stitches on my forehead, and I had a black eye, and just totally looked like shit. And I said to myself, I'm going to go 1 year without drinking alcohol, without being drunk every night of my life, and see how much I get done. And after a year went by, I got so much shit done. I felt so good about myself. I decided to make it 10 years. So I'm a year 8 now. But I think the point I was going to make about this was on January 2nd that year, I looked horrendous, and I got to perform, and thank God, like the biggest snowstorm, a nor'easter hit.
Yep, it snowed that weekend.
The Northeast, all of Philadelphia got shut down. So I was given an extra 24 hours to like build my confidence up, and I remember I wrote a couple jokes about it that I opened with.
You had one about wrinkles, I remember.
What was it?
You had a joke about wrinkles. Didn't you have a joke about wrinkles, the ones that are going horizontal or natural?
Yeah. The lines that go like this, the wrinkles. And yeah. So the amazing thing that happened on the night off, and then the next day there was the snowstorm hit, and I really felt like Helium in Philadelphia was one of my clubs that I always had a great following, and the staff loved me. I loved playing there, and the owner never had me back after that. And I always think like stories when you hear about somebody cleaning up or getting their shit together. They're like, you always assume that like people rally around those people and like encourage them and support them, but I don't know what the story is with
So
Philadelphia.
you feel like you had the opposite thing go down there, like that happened and then that was it.
I feel like I'm very confused by the fact that they never had me back. I always had really solid numbers there. Did 3 New Year's Eves. Thought I was one of the special loved performers, and being
Well, I can
sober
tell you,
didn't seem to didn't seem to be a plus.
I can tell you as a Philly comic you were, because we loved when you came by. And so, my very good friend Chip Chantry.
Love Chip.
Yeah, one of my best friends. We lived together, and 1 week after Helium, you stayed with us, and we thought that was so cool because we're all friends, but we also grew up loving you as a comic. So I'd wake up to go pee in the morning, and then there's Tom Rhodes sleeping on our couch. There's just Tom Rhodes in our apartment. We thought it was the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, it was nice. I didn't live anywhere for a few years, for like 10 years. And I remember I had like 2 days off before I had to fly to Chicago or something. And I was going to get a hotel, and you guys offered for me to stay in your place. And
I remember that very well because, okay, do you remember like everything? Like, do you remember conversations with people? Like, do a lot of things stick out to you? Does that make sense?
Sometimes no.
Okay, and that makes sense too, because I guess it's the same on my end. But when you stayed with us, 2 things happened that I still remember to this day. I was very nervous to ask you this, but I got a brand new notebook that week, and I asked you to sign it for me. And I felt very nerdy because I knew you then, and you were staying with us, and here's some dipshit like, hey, can I have your autograph? I was like, fuck, I hate myself, but I did it. And you wrote shit in all 4 corners on the front cover. And I still think about that.
Yeah, I don't think that's dorky at all. I think
I know, but you were staying with us, and I knew you, and I'm asking you for your autograph. Like, I'm not some fanboy.
Really.
We're like peers at this point. You know what I mean?
No, you were asking me to turn your notebook into a historical artifact.
Oh, all right. Now that's going to stick with me. So you just reversed that. Thank you.
Yeah. When I was younger, I mean, I used to carry my notebook with me, and I had it with me at all times. And I've got John Lee Hooker's autograph in one of my notebooks. In a really old notebook, I have O.J. Simpson's autograph.
Where'd that come from?
Irvine.
If you don't mind me.
I was emceeing at the Irvine Improv, and he was in the audience. And but then I've asked, like, through the years, comedian friends of mine that I look up to, I admire, friends of mine, however you want to say it. Hey man, would you mind, just writing me a little note in this thing? I think it's a really cool thing to do.
Thank you.
I don't think it's dorky. And what I think is dorky is not to have a fucking comedy notebook.
Well, I appreciate that. That makes me think differently. But yeah, at the time, I just felt like I was just, I don't know. I felt dorky at the time. But I remember that, asking you to sign that, and you wrote shit in all 4 corners. And then me, you, and Chip went for a walk from our apartment. It's like a 2.5 mile walk down to the Delaware River. And we're walking through, like, down the Benjamin Franklin Parkway, past all the architecture and monuments. And you told us how much you loved Philly and how you would live here if it wasn't for the winter.
Yes.
You said you loved all the architecture around the city, and you said it's a beautiful city. You said it reminded you, I don't know if you said Paris or what, but you were like, this city's beautiful, and I would live here, but you guys have winter.
If Philly is a beautiful city, and that getting to Center City, near where Helium is, getting to experience that part of town there's that old part of town. What's with the cobblestones?
Yeah, that's called Old City. It's where Independence Hall is and the Liberty Bell and all that stuff.
And that's the coolest. And even the grittier parts where there's warehouses and old auto repair transmission shops. I just find Philadelphia a really cool city. And I made that statement when I think when Helium was still. I thought they were my number one supporter. No, I think Philly's awesome. I wish I had a lot of money to buy different properties in different cities that I love.
Oh my God. That's like part of the dream too, right? So you love Philly. Didn't you say, did we talk one time? Did you not you lived in New York a couple times, right?
Twice, yeah.
Twice? Yeah. Did you not like the first time, or am I making that up?
Yeah, I wasn't ready. I moved there when I was 20 years old. And
so you were that young. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
so
I wasn't that skilled. Everybody, at that time, the advice was always, if you want to be a comedian, you got to move to New York or LA, and you're wasting your time. Even I met Jay Leno, and he told me, I asked him for advice.
When did you meet him? How old were you? Was he famous yet? Was he at Tonight Show? Or?
I was 16, and he was still a great kind of political comedian in the early 80s. And I said, I want to be a comedian. Is there any advice you can give me? And he said, if you want to be a comedian, you got to live in New York or LA. And that was the advice people always gave. So I just had my career path. I just thought I got to get to New York. So I moved there when I was 20. Wasn't good enough to get in with, I did Dangerfields a lot, which just closed.
61st and First. Bombed there many times.
I got to do a few sets at the Catch a Rising Star, because I had opened for Richard Belzer at the Punchline in Atlanta. Belzer loved me, walked me in under his arm, and they gave me a few sets. But mostly I did one-nighters in New Jersey and Long Island, and I could only afford to live in Washington Heights. And this was 1987, the year that crack had come into Washington Heights and a lot of other American cities.
Did you partake at the time?
No, fuck no. I was terrified. Man, I could barely afford to get I could barely afford to eat. I was eating roast pork fried rice from this Chinese place for $1.50 a day. And I lived on Cabrini Avenue. You could hear gunshots at night. And in the morning, there'd be burning, smoldering cars. People would steal cars in Lower Manhattan and drive them up there and just set them on fire. So, being a guy who grew up in, suburban Orlando, it was terrifying.
That's a different fucking world.
Yeah.
Because I did so you said you did New York twice. I did New York once. I did New York in 2011. I was 7 or 8 years into comedy, and I just I didn't hate it, but I didn't like it because I was already featuring at some clubs on the road, and I would get paid work in Philly, Jersey, Maryland. And now I'm starting at the very, very bottom. And I get that. I didn't expect to go in and fucking take it over. I was well aware of where I stood, but I was just amazed at the amount, people I wanted to get on stage, but they had bringer open mics and pay for stage time. And it's fucking, I just had a month work of feature work. I'm not paying to do 5 minutes at Tuesday at 5:00. I'm not fucking doing that.
Yeah, and then how are you going to bring people when you just moved to a city and the only other people are comedians,
Exactly. And also, how am I going to do a bringer show 8 years into my career when I've never done one before? So, I did New York for a year, but I can't even say I really did it because I would drive back and forth every 3 or 4 days because I know I could get decent stage time or, paid week in Philly. I would leave New York because I was going to do
the best way to develop as a comedian is to actually have somewhat of a life. So, if you're living somewhere, if you're living somewhere in a city and, you've made it to feature you got to, you got your friends and your family, to go to New York or LA and get into the back of the line and like struggle for a couple years to, pay rent or whatever. I don't think that's bad advice, Jay Leno.
Yeah, yeah. There was a lot of weird, like even just for example, be like I would sign up for this open mic at 4:00, and the guy who's running it, it's like his third time on stage ever, but he's prohibiting my stage time, even though I just did Portland with you the previous weekend, and this fuck this guy. You know what I mean? Like a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, I want no part of this. So
Well,
I moved back to Philly, and then I hit the road hard. So it worked out.
Yeah, I think that's the smart way to do it. And then you establish yourself in these other cities. But for me, the second time I moved to New York was after I had a sitcom on NBC and I had a truckload of money in the bank. So I lived there completely broke, and I lived there with lots of money. And I think the lots of money is the better way to live in New York.
Yeah, I would probably, put that in that column as well. What I love about your career is, and I've admired this my whole time knowing you, is just how much you've performed internationally. Do you, you performed all over the world many, many, many times over, and I love that. You have stories about every city, and even on your albums and whatnot, you have stories about performing all over the world. Is there anywhere you've performed that just like hasn't got you? Is there like any specific corner of this world where you've performed several times and you just don't click with them?
No.
Or they don't click with you?
No.
Good. That's a great answer. That's what I wanted to hear.
No, I mean, I remember.
I don't know if you're going to say like somewhere in like America, be like, yeah, just fucking Wichita does not, or
Oh yeah, well, I certainly struggled in Wichita, the one and only time I ever played there. But no, I thought you were like talking internationally and stuff. I lived in Amsterdam for 5 years, and I was that's when I started doing the international circuits. I had gotten in with London first. I was playing London a lot before I moved to Amsterdam. But the Comedy Store in London, there was a club in Berlin that every weekend they would send an English-speaking comedian to do 10 minutes on this German show. So all the German comedians were speaking in German. And then they'd have a 10-minute, performer in English. I remember the first time I went to Berlin, and I did this weekend. It was kind of a struggle, but it was at the same time, I think the second Gulf War had just started, and there was a lot of attitude towards any American at the time. But then I've been back. I've done different shows in Berlin since then, and they were great. That was just like one club. There's nowhere that I thought,
just a specific nut you couldn't crack.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you get to a certain level, you know how to shift gear.
Yeah, no, I get it. I just didn't know if there was like a specific spot where you're just like, man, I can't get these people every time.
Oh, yeah, no, I've never really had that problem. And I put out this record last year, 2019, called Around the World. And
and didn't our friend, sorry to cut you off, didn't Alex Dingley do that one?
Yes.
And yes, he did my first album.
And I met Alex through you and Chip Chantry.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's a great dude, man. He did my first album. So
Alex has edited my last 3 records.
Oh, that's awesome.
So and it took a lot of editing because there was a lot of different shows, but Around the World, I recorded in 24 cities around the world. Starts in Paris, ends in Jerusalem. It's all mostly jokes and stories about each place because I've been doing the international circuits for 20 years. So a lot of the stories and jokes I had developed. It was supposed to be 25 cities around the world, but the sound for Ho Chi Minh City wasn't as good as I had hoped, so that's why it's 24 cities. But last year, I put out a record, and I started editing it with Alex Dingley at the beginning of the pandemic. It's called The Honky Motherland, and I did a tour of England in 2019, a theater tour where I played all over. And Alex and I had chosen April 1st to start editing the podcast, April 1st, 2020. So at the beginning of March, I started doing the notes on these shows. I had 60 shows from around England. And so when the pandemic hit, for the first few months, I think for the first 4-5 months, I was working on this album with Alex. I'd listened to all the shows, made notes, had to listen to them many times to see what I wanted to keep, what I wanted to keep out. I'd send him the recordings via Dropbox, and I just put out that record a few months ago. And Alex, Philadelphia has been really good to me for friends and talented people who can help me.
Dude, we love having you here. You and I also talked before. I remember, so the first time I did the San Francisco Punchline, you told me that club, I believe you said it's like being in the womb, was your exact wording. And that is the fucking truth, man. I've done that club a handful of times, and that club is its own separate beast. That, not even beast, that makes it sound like it's something aggressive. That club is unreal.
Yeah, I mean that's always been, I'd say, my favorite comedy club in the world. I moved, I started out in Florida, and then I moved to New York when I was 20, and I started doing the Southern circuits. I played all over the South. Moved to New York when I was 20, wasn't ready yet. Lived there for a year. Moved back to Florida for a year and licked my wounds. And I moved to San Francisco when I was 22, and I lived there for 7 years. And that's where San Francisco is where I pulled it together as a comedian, where I could, my favorite kind of audience is multinational, multi-ethnic, and somewhat well-informed.
Yeah, smart people that get it. And I've always got that in San Fran.
Comedy fans. And so... with these kind of audiences, I could do the more thoughtful pieces or existential thoughts. I could push myself to be a smarter comedian, and that's where I credit the San Francisco Punchline with. Pretty much, that's where I became the comedian I am today because of that club.
That's awesome, because I love knowing that you love that place, and you can tell walking in there that club just has history and like passion behind it. So if you say that's where you like cut your teeth and became the comic who you are today, who was your crew of friends then? Like who was your crew?
At that time, so when I moved there 1991, Mark Maron, Patton Oswalt, Margaret Cho, Greg Proops, Dana
okay, I know those names.
Dana Gould started coming around. I think he would do sets a lot.
I just emailed Dana today.
It was such a golden age of comedy in San Francisco.
That's an incredible crew. I mean, I would fucking love to see a lineup of all those names you just said.
Yeah, and then I mean, these were so you talk about like just wanting to impress your comedian friends. So you're pushing yourself to impress these friends of yours, and these were my friends. So I think everybody kind of had that same attitude. Everybody loved comedy. Everyone's trying to impress the others with the best, funniest thoughts, and Now, in the 90s, you could move to San Francisco and you could be a comedian or be in a band or try and, be a writer or something. Now the rents are so exorbitant that it's impossible. It would be impossible to do that now.
Yeah, that the whole entire area is ridiculous when it comes to like just the cost of living there.
Yeah, it was really cool, and I lived in there's the historic black area of the Fillmore district, and then right next to it, it was called the Western Addition, which was also a black neighborhood. Now they call it NOPA. They changed the fucking name. It's been totally gentrified. But Divisadero, where I lived, they had the Church of John Coltrane. It was a little storefront church. And it was the first place I ever saw a picture of a black Jesus. The pastor never spoke. He just played saxophone.
That sounds awesome.
His wife played stand-up bass, and there was a drummer. And it started at 3 p.m. after regular church, and I think it would be a jam session until about 6. And there were instruments on all the pews, and everyone was encouraged to pick up an instrument because we're all a part of the music. And there was just really cool, artsy shit like that going on. And the Fillmore Auditorium was a short walk from my apartment. I lived across the street from Alamo Square Park. It was just, I could get subversive books and literature at City Lights bookstore, lie in the grass, read William Burroughs' Naked Lunch or whatever.
Dude,
it was cool.
That sounds like heaven. Just totally ingratiating yourself in all that culture.
Yeah, and so I like for me, San Francisco and the San Francisco Punchline, it was like graduate school for being a comedian. Like I thought I had reached a certain level where I was, and I knew I always thought a higher intelligence of comedy came out of there. So, and I moved there. I think I had saved up $600-$700 and drove there with everything I owned.
You drove from Florida?
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, and then it worked out, and then that's where Comedy Central noticed me, and I started working for them, and everything. San Francisco is where everything came together for me.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really cool to hear. I had a weird thing happen at the Punchline one time. I shouldn't even say weird thing. So I'm featuring there for the very first time, but the headliner couldn't make Wednesday or Thursday. So they became showcases, and Molly let me headline them. And it was really cool of her to let me do that. But the Wednesday show had a really small crowd. And there was 2 older people in the front, like old. I mean, I don't mean old. Like we're talking like, I don't know, mid-70s. Not ancient, but old. And I did a couple jokes about Philly, but I'm sitting in the back of my mind. I'm watching them in the crowd. I'm like, they're not going to like me. And they were both from Philly. And I'm like, fuck, because I did a joke about Temple University, and then I like compared San Fran to Philly, and after the show, they were like, oh, we loved it. We both went to Penn, and I was like, no shit, here I am judging a book by its cover, and I'm wrong. They loved the show, and they understood all my Philly shit, and then they actually talked about Wawa to me, which is very Philly specific.
Yeah, Wawas are all over the East Coast now, all over Florida.
Oh yeah, they're down into Florida now.
That's a funny thing you learn as a comedian. Like, there's been times where like someone would be in the front row and you think they're not enjoying it, and everyone else is laughing, and then you talk to them after the show, and they're like, "Oh, we're from Spain. We were trying to follow along as best as we could."
Dude, that's what happened to me at Dangerfield.
The shit you think on stage as a comedian, and you're like, couldn't be more wrong. Like, they're from Philly. They loved you more than anyone.
Going back to Dangerfield, I don't think I ever performed in front of an American crowd there. I bomb there all the time, and then I'm walking out, and every couple speaking a different language. I'm like, of course, I'm not going to get my jokes about whatever the fuck I was talking about.
Yeah,
but yeah. All right, I'm gonna let you go soon, dude. Thank you for being on this so much. I just want to say I've talked Mitch Hedberg with a handful of comics on this podcast, and you just did your thing on Sirius about him, correct?
Yes.
That's awesome, man. He was one of the best, and you knew him very well. Do you have a favorite Mitch story? There's probably a lot for you to choose from, but is there anything?
Yeah. I just got to tell all of my best Hedberg stories. The second time I lived in New York, I was living at 71 Broadway in the Wall Street area, and Hedberg was living at the Chelsea Hotel, which is a short walk from there. And we partied and did a lot of drugs together, and a lot of cocaine. Did pure liquid LSD and would walk around the Wall Street area. We did a lot of cool things, but Mitch and I used to co-headline at the Laugh Stop in Houston.
Mhm.
He wanted me to play this club. I wasn't in there, and he brought me in to co-headline with him. And we did it I think we did it 3 times together, and it was like Led Zeppelin hitting the town. And they would put you at this Allen Park Hotel, which was on the Allen Parkway, and it doesn't exist anymore. It was this massive hotel complex, maybe 1,000 rooms, and maybe I think maybe it was thriving in the 50s or 60s, but in the late 90s there'd be like 50 people staying in this 1,000 room hotel. So we always stayed on the back property because nobody would be back there. We could leave the doors open, play music, and there was a swimming pool. I think they had 2 pools on that property. One of them was in the back, and we would always invite the local Houston comedians back over to hang out and party, and we had invited a bunch of people who had been at the show. And, we got the doors open and we're playing music, and Hedberg and I had taken mushrooms, and we're rocking on mushrooms. And then next to the pool was this big lawn, and the water sprinklers came on. It was like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. So Hedberg and I stripped naked, and we ran through the sprinklers like a couple of homoerotic nymphs. And and then we would dive into the pool, and then we'd get out of the pool soaking wet and run through the sprinklers again, and then dive back into the pool. I think we did this probably like 20, 30 times. And there were people that had been at the show that were there. And there were all these local comedians. And fortunately, camera phones didn't exist at the time. Well, maybe it would have been nice to see that footage. And
Would you have wanted to seen it though?
yeah, I had a pretty slim.
Yeah, I'm thinking if I was in your shoes, I would too.
Yeah, I've always been pretty happy with my body. I'm not ashamed. But I think that was that. And I told the story on that Hedberg documentary. One time, Ralphie May heard me telling this story, and he goes, "I was there. I did that with you." I'm like, no, you didn't. Everyone would remember a naked Ralphie May.
I didn't know you were going to say that, but that's exactly what I was going to say.
And Ralphie may have been there. He was one who he was somewhat of a braggart who stretched the truth whenever it was convenient, and he did not experience that with us. And but all the local comedians were there in Houston, and I'd say there was probably about 50 people there that we had been partying with, and it was just really fun. I just remember my stomach hurting from laughing so hard, and just Hedberg was really fun. He was such a sweet, beautiful guy. And I think there was a period of about 2 or 3 years where he and I were just inseparable best friends. And, and then, he looked up to me, and he always treated me like I was someone really special to him. And that meant the world to me. And, there's so much mythology and legend around the guy, and he deserves all of it. But like when I think of Hedberg, like, you know, his jokes are brilliant. They're clean. They'll last forever. You know, he's like the Beatles. You know, he wrote a song for everybody. This is like, you know, like that's why I use the Beatles comparison. Like old people love Hedberg. Kids love Hedberg. Everybody loves Hedberg. But aside from the man being an absolute genius of a comedian, he was a really beautiful friend. And I'm, you know, looking back on it now, I really cherish the memories of all this like crazy fun shit that I got to do with him.
No, that's awesome. And that's exactly what I wanted to hear because I saw him live a couple times and I met him once. I actually met him, excuse me, the night I like said to myself, you're doing an open mic. You are doing an open mic. You are fucking trying this. You're doing it. He was on that show. So that's why I always have a soft spot for him. But I also loved his whole entire career.
Yeah, and
All his jokes.
even after he got well known, he would do open mic nights. He would do like gigs that people thought there was some gig in North Dakota that he fucking loved. I remember, and like there was the Coconuts in St. Pete. It only paid $300 to headline, and Hedberg was still doing that gig after he became famous because he liked the hotel was on the beach. He liked to go there.
Did they at least pay him more at the time, or did he just take the gig for what it was?
No.
Wow.
No. There's no fairness in comedy.
Oh, that's it. That's what we're going to title this episode. There's no fairness in comedy.
No, don't say that because I don't say that. That's
no. I was only kidding. I wouldn't do that. I'm going to ask you one more thing before we go. Again, thank you for being here, man. I love you, and you know, thank you you've been so good to me my entire career and always complimentary, and I love that too, man. And I love everything you've done. So thank you for being here. It means a lot.
You know, your heart's in the right place. So, you know, and you work hard, you write your ass off, and I admire that in anybody who is a comedian.
Thank you, man. So I love a good horror story. So like when was give me a good story if you can about you bombing headlining. Have you had anything where I know we talked earlier about like international shit, but have you ever had something happen where you're the headliner, they're there to see you, or the room sold out and you're headlining and it just fucking did not go well?
Oh, wow. I'm sure there's a few, nothing coming to mind. I remember there was
anything. I mean, I just like a good horror story because we all can relate.
You know, at Edinburgh, at the Edinburgh Festival in Scotland, there's this gig called Leighton Live, and it starts, I think, at midnight or even later, and people would go there to heckle.
Christ almighty. All right.
You got all these drunk English people and Scottish people, and it was really and I knew lots of English comedians who wouldn't even do it because they, you know, the place was notorious for handing people their asses. And my friend Rich Hall was supposed to headline this gig, and it was a show of all Americans, and it turned into this really. And this was 2000, so it was a year before September 11th when everyone was shoulder to shoulder. It was really it turned into this anti-American rally, and it was like all these comedians. I'm watching, it was, you know, lambs being led to the slaughter. And Rich Hall, my buddy, mysteriously, he's got laryngitis. He chickened out. And he didn't even want to stay. He left and he asked me if I wanted the spot. And I was so cocky, I thought, you know, they'll fucking love me. So I was pounding beers to get a little liquid confidence. And then when they introduced me, and there was a lot of people to see Rich Hall. They were disappointed about that, number one. So when they introduced me, the sound man fucked me. He played God Bless America as I walked out. And this already anti-American audience lost their mind. And I couldn't even get started on the mic. Fuck you, go back to America, fuck you. And I remember I remember I sat down Indian style on the stage and I lit a cigarette, and I can still picture this panoramic image of all these ugly contorted faces and the spittle coming out of their mouth as they're yelling, "Fuck you, go back to America, fuck America," and all this shit. And then, like, I remember I got up and I said, "Hey, listen, I have a drinking problem. Just let me stay up here long enough to earn my free drinks." And that got like a couple chuckles, and half the place quieted down. And then I tried to start, but whatever I chose was the wrong joke to go into. And it was that was pretty horrifying, but it wasn't my fault. Wasn't my gig.
No,
And
I got thrown upon you.
then in 2014, after the year I got sober, I did Edinburgh. So Leighton Live is not what it was. It used to be really, people still go there and heckle, but it's not like the sport of the gig that it used to be. It used to be a real, fighting lions in the Coliseum thing. So I did Edinburgh for a month in 2014, and to shake this memory, because I think the best thing you can do with bad memories is to pave over them with good ones. I think I did 6 sets at Leighton Live in 2014, and I went there just my quiver was full of arrows with the most poisonous tips.
Ooh.
Whenever I got heckled, I just pummeled the person with like the most horrific, humiliating shit that a comedian can say to another human being. I more than made up for that experience.
Now, did you have shit ready in your back pocket?
I said, I've been waiting 14. I told the story about what happened to me in 2000. I said, I've been waiting 14 years. Does anyone else want to fucking heckle me? Because I'm ready for you now, motherfuckers.
Oh, that's awesome.
I said, I just came to watch that show in 2000, and I'm ready for you now. But it turned it into a really fun thing. It was like there were people that went to multiple shows in 2014 that were like, they could tell I was there to have fun, and humiliate anyone who opened their mouth to heckle me, just because I wanted to avenge that memory.
Well, it sounds like you did a good job. You did. That's now. Okay, so did you go into that show with shit in your back pocket, or did you treat each heckle individually as it needed to be handled? That makes sense.
Both.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
I thought of every great heckler comeback line I've ever used in my life, and then, in the year 2000 was when I moved to Europe, so I wasn't as worldly, and I know England, Ireland, Scotland, and Europe like the back of my hand, and I know, tons of things about it. So I was just a more seasoned adult performer when I did it again. But the moral of the story is, if you're at some horrendous show and some friend of yours asks you to fill his spot because he's too scared to do it himself, tell him to suck it up and be a man, and that's his bullet to take, not yours.
That's comedy words of wisdom right there.
Yeah, baby.
Dude, thank you so much for being here, man. I appreciate it. I really do, man. It means a lot that you're here. I've been a fan of yours forever, and we've been buddies and hung out all over the place, but it means a lot that you stopped in for a spot on my new endeavor here. It really does mean a lot. So thank you.
I love you, Pat. And, tell your father I said hi. Tell Chip I said hello.
Absolutely.
I really look forward to seeing you and my other comedy friends and family, once the world goes back to normal breathing conditions. And I'm really excited about, because, think how great it's going to be to go to live shows again.
Oh my God. Comedy and music.
I really think, like, they said the Roaring '20s was, the Spanish flu was in 1918
Yep.
to what, the 1920. So people talk about how the Roaring '20s of last century. I think that's what people are going to be so balls out, partying, having fun. I think disco is going to come back, but I think.
Oh.
I mean, like dancing and having fun, but just like all the fun things, I think people are really going to appreciate. And I think comedy it's more needed than ever. And I think people are. It's going to be really exciting and fun to get back at it. And I can't wait to work with you again, my brother.
Likewise, man. We will definitely cross paths this year. So, is there anything you want to plug?
My album Around the World. You can get it Amazon, iTunes. The Honky Motherland album, recorded in England, Ireland, and Scotland, is on iTunes and Amazon. And next month, this is my first vinyl record I've ever made.
Nice.
Next month, I will have the vinyl record version of the Honky Motherland. So,
that's awesome. Oh man,
yeah.
you're gonna frame that one, right? Put one up for you.
Oh, sure, why not?
Oh, good.
I hadn't thought
You know
of
what? Now that you mentioned it, you just plug your last two albums. I still have my autographed copy of Hot Sweet Ass.
That was my first album. Wow.
Yep. Oh, I still have it.
We haven't
Believe
known
me.
each other for a long time.
Yeah. Oh man, you know what? I should have taken a picture. You wrote something on the front cover, and I have no idea what it was. I don't have it with me now, but I mean, I wish I had taken a look at that before I did this. But oh well, that is the way it goes.
Oh well, I think we've had a pretty solid conversation, Pat.
Dude, absolutely. And again, thank you.
You forgetting to look at the Hot Sweet Ass cover is forgivable.
Thank you. In the grand scheme of things, that is pretty minimal on the conversation. Dude, thank you so much, as always. Tom Rhodes, thank you.
Thank you, brother. And do me a favor. If you're walking by a parking garage, look up before you take the
You know what? Best advice to leave the podcast with. And good night.
See you, brother.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.